Hi, this is Sue Jackson of the Book by Book blog, and I'm here today with my September wrap-up. So in September, I had two major challenges overlapping. One finishing in the first week of September and another one starting for fall. So I'll tell you all about that. These are the print books that I finished in September. Plus a couple of audios. Now, it looks like a lot, but some of those were big books that I finished in the very first week. So during the summer, I host a challenge called the Big Book Summer Challenge. The idea is just to read books with 400 or more pages. However many you want is up to you. So I was finishing that up in the first week of September. The challenge ends on Labor Day in the U.S., which I think was September 6th this year. So that first week, I was finishing up a couple of these really big ones, and one on audio as well. And then the rest of the month, I dove into the R.I.P challenge for fall, which is one of my favorite times of year. I love fall this season because the weather's beautiful, and of course the gorgeous colors in the trees, but I also love this reading challenge. The idea is just to read darker stuff in the fall, and it doesn't necessarily mean scary stuff like horror. I really don't read much of that. It's more however you define it, mysteries, thrillers, anything supernatural or ghosty, darker fantasy, gothic, however you define it. The R.I.P stands for Readers Imbibing Peril. So let me tell you what I read last month. So first, I finished the biggest of my big books, Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. This was my first ever classic Russian novel. I had never read any of them before, and it was a hefty one. It took me the entire month of August and that first week in September, but I did finish it, and I did enjoy it. So Anna Karenina, just so you don't get intimidated by it, it's basically a Russian soap opera. I think it's set in the 1800s. Around Moscow and Petersburg. There's a whole, even though the title says Anna Karenina, it's not just about Anna. There are a whole bunch of characters whose lives you follow through love and loss and family, and, like I said, it's basically a soap opera. Anna's story was not actually my favorite part of the book. To be honest, it's a little depressing, more than a little. She's in a rough situation with no good answer, no good way out. But I really enjoyed, there's another character, Levin, who is a gentleman farmer, and a woman named Kitty. And I really enjoyed following both of their stories. So that was probably my favorite part of Anna Karenina. So I finished Anna Karenina just in time for the end of Big Book Summer. That first week of September, I also finished another big book, Dragon Hoops by Jean Luen Yang. As you can see, this definitely qualified as a big book. This is a graphic novel. So it is all about, as you can tell from the cover, basketball. The author is a high school teacher, and by his own admission, he is not into sports, really doesn't follow any sports, not into basketball. So I could relate. I'm kind of the same way. But he teaches at this high school, and basketball is king there all year round, really. The students, the teachers, the alumni, the parents, everybody's into basketball. And they've got a winning team that very often goes to the state championship in California. So he begins interviewing some of the players and the coach, and the result is this book. It's kind of meta because he's in the book talking about writing the book, So, but it's fun. So let me just show you some of the drawings. So that's a scene, obviously, of one of the basketball games, one of the bigger ones. He also gets into some background on the players. So, you know, he talks to the players pretty in depth about where they came from and what their background and history are, what their family's like. And there's also, he even incorporates some history in here. History of the game of basketball, history of women's basketball. So there's a lot to it, and I really enjoyed it. So you don't have to be a basketball fan or a sports fan at all to enjoy Dragon Hoops by Jean Lewin Yang. That first week of September, I also finished one last big book audiobook, A Better Man by Louise Penny. Now, this was kind of an odd choice for me because I've only read one other Louise Penny book. I think she's up to 17 in the series now, and A Better Man is, I think, number 15. And the only other book in her series that I've ever read was book 1. So I kind of skipped ahead there. But it was in my audio backlog, which is huge. My TBR for audio is just as massive as my TBR for books. And I wanted something that would cross over for the 2 challenges. Finish up Big Book Summer and kick off the R.I.P. challenge. So A Better Man fit. This is a mystery series set in Quebec, starring Inspector Gamache, and the town of Three Pines, kind of a quaint little village outside of Quebec. In her books in this series, the town and the people who live in the town are just as much a part of the mysteries and the stories as the head inspector is. So in this particular one, A Better Man, there are 2 things going on at once, which makes it very exciting and gripping. There is a natural disaster happening, the worst flooding in more than 100 years in the region, you know, rivers set to overflow, all of law enforcement in the area and the Corps of Engineers and other groups just totally focused on how to mitigate or prevent the worst of the damage, because whole towns, including Three Pines, could be just destroyed with this storm and this flooding. So that's going on. But at the same time, there's a mystery, a new case that Inspector Gamache takes on of a missing woman. And she has some personal connection to one of the other officers. So, you know, he really feels a responsibility to follow up on this case in spite of what's happening in the rest of the area. So the woman went missing from a rural area very close to Three Pines. So you've got that connection again. It was great, like all of her books. Well, the 2 that I've read so far. It's a good mystery, intricate, very twisty. She really keeps you guessing. I mean, towards the end, you know, I guessed like every single character was the bad guy, and and I was wrong every time. So she's really good at that. Gripping suspense. I enjoyed it. So that was A Better Man by Louise Penny, an excellent way to kick off the R.I.P. challenge. Next, even though I was dying to dig into that huge stack of books I pulled off for the R.I.P. challenge, you can check out another video on that to see my over-ambitious goals. I did have a book group book to read first, and that was The Book of Longings by Sue Monk Kidd. This was for my neighborhood book group, which met around mid-month. To be honest, I was not looking forward to reading this. It was one of those books that we vote on our books in my group. It got the most votes, and I was just like, oh, this does not sound like something I'm going to like. Well, as usual with a book group, I was completely wrong. And at our discussion, several other members admitted they felt the same way. They didn't want to read it. But almost everyone, we did have one holdout who was just kind of meh, but everyone else in book group loved this book. It's very unusual. And again, when I heard the description, I didn't want to read it. So I'm going to try not to turn you off of it. What she's done here is written a book about women in the 1st century, basically biblical times. Now, the premise, I think, sometimes does turn people off. It's about a woman named Anna, who in this novel, this is fiction, is the fictional wife of Jesus. Yes, that Jesus. Now, I've seen some reviews online where some people really took offense at this, but the author explains in an afterword that the Bible says absolutely nothing about Jesus's life between age 12 and the crucifixion when he's in his early 30s. So the author's intention here was to write a novel that kind of fills in that gap about what could have been. Now, to be clear, this is not a book about Jesus. It is a book about a woman named Anna, who for a short while becomes his wife. The book is really focused on women's lives, and this is what everyone in my book group loved. It's historical fiction set in the 1st century, which of course most of us know very little about. So it's not only about Anna, it's about her elderly aunt who has had some horrible experiences. Anna is a woman who is passionate about words and writing, which was not a thing women were even allowed to do at that time. She was lucky. She was brought up in a wealthy family, and her father kind of, gave in to her pleading and hired some tutors so that she did learn to read and write multiple languages, as was common in the region in that time. So she did know how to read and writing just became this passion for her, and particularly writing down women's stories, because she noticed they were almost completely missing from the Bible, that the focus was on men. So she took biblical women and women from her real life and wrote down their stories. So Anna feels this passion for writing, and that's what the book is really about. And it's about her entire life, not just the portion that she spent as Jesus's wife. So even if it doesn't sound like you'd like it, I'm telling you, it's beautifully written. It's fascinating. And almost my entire book group loved it. So that was The Book of Longings by Sue Monk Kidd. Next up for me was another audiobook for the R.I.P challenge. And I like to mix things up, and I like a lot of variety in my reading. So this time I chose sort of a crossover, middle grade, teen YA. It'd be fine for any of those age groups, audiobook. And in a genre I don't normally read. So the title is A Corner of White by Jacqueline Moriarty. And this is kind of a mystery fantasy. And I don't read a lot of fantasy. To be honest, I don't really enjoy fantasy with like a whole made up world. My son loves that. That's like almost all he reads. So I do understand the passion many people have for that genre. I just don't share it. But I have noticed that I do sometimes enjoy fantasy novels that are set in the real world, but with elements or bits of fantasy or magic woven in. And that's what this was. In fact, this fit my taste perfectly. And I've heard from other people who really enjoyed this trilogy. It's the start of a trilogy. So there are two parallel narratives in this book. First, in the real world, and they call it the real world, in Cambridge, England, in modern day, there are three teenagers who are all homeschooled together and are friends. And one of those teens is a girl named Madeline, and she's really having trouble adjusting to her new life. She and her mother live in a pretty shabby little apartment in Cambridge and are barely scraping by. They eat beans for dinner every night because her father left. So Madeline doesn't know exactly why her dad left. She keeps thinking that, if she can just get a hold of him and find him, he'll come back. But before he left, they lived this life of luxury, traveling around to like the most amazing cities in the world. Everything was luxury. And so this is quite a fall for them. So she and her mom are living in this little apartment. And Madeline's really starting to worry about her mom too, because she has headaches all the time. She seems to be kind of losing it mentally. So Madeline's worried about that. Now, at the same time, in a parallel narrative, there is a world called the Kingdom of Cello and a town called Bonfire. And in Bonfire lives a teen boy named Elliot. And Elliot's father is also missing, though very different circumstances. So in this world, this fantasy world, cello is very similar to our world. Elliot lives in a farming community with like little things here and there that are different. Their weather can change like day by day and hour by hour. And I don't mean like, oh, it's raining and then the sun came out. I mean like they say, oh, winter lasted 3 days this time and now it's hot again. So that sort of thing. This world also has colors, not like our colors, but like, I don't even know how to explain it. Colors in their world can change the weather. They can cause natural disasters, and certain colors can be dangerous. So the night that Elliot's father disappeared, another woman from town also disappeared. She taught physics at Elliot's school. And his uncle, Elliot's uncle, his father's brother, was killed. So there are two differing viewpoints in town. One, that his father killed his own brother and then ran off with the physics teacher. And of course, Elliot doesn't believe that. The other, and in their world this is very possible, is that an attack of purples came along. Purples are known to murder and they are known to kidnap. So Elliot, and the police are wondering too, but Elliot feels quite sure that it was purples that killed his uncle and kidnapped his father and the teacher. So Elliot's trying to travel all over the kingdom to look for his father. So you've got two kids in parallel worlds, both with missing fathers, and a crack opens up between their two worlds. And Elliot and Madeline begin to pass letters back and forth. It's a tiny crack. A person couldn't fit through it, but they can send letters back and forth to each other. And Madeline thinks, of course, at first that Elliot's just this, weird teenager who plays too many video games and has a wild imagination as Elliot's trying to, explain where he lives. But the two keep communicating. I loved this book. I think I just got into way too much detail about it, but that just tells you how much I enjoyed it. That's A Corner of White by Jacqueline Moriarty. It's book one of a trilogy, and I definitely want to read more. Next, I continued diving into the R.I.P. challenge with The Lying Game by Ruth Ware. Ruth Ware is always good for some good, creepy, twisty thrillers, and this one was no exception. It's about 4 girls who were in boarding school together and played the lying game, basically just competing against each other to come up with the biggest, most outrageous lies and get other people to believe them. So it was kind of an us against the world sort of thing. But they became very good at lying. So now they're all adults. It's 17 years later. Something has happened back in the town where they went to school. And one of the 4 friends calls the other 3 back. She still lives there. And they all go. So this is kind of the past meeting the present. There are 2 narrative threads, one when they were at school together and one in the present, as their secrets and lies are kind of unraveling. So like I said, like with all Ruth Ware's novels, very twisty and unpredictable, lots of suspense, pretty creepy. So that was perfect for the R.I.P. challenge. And speaking of perfect for R.I.P., I next read The Sense of Reckoning by Maddie Dalrymple. I love this series. I really love it. She's a local author. I live in Delaware. She's over the border in Pennsylvania. Delaware's very tiny, so that's very close. And she writes this series of Anne Kinnear suspense stories. And Anne Kinnear is a woman who can sense spirits. So sometimes she gets hired for real estate issues, like someone wants to know if there's a ghost in the house they're going to buy. And sometimes the police come to her to help with a case. So I should have grabbed it to show you, but the first book in the series was The Sense of Death. And in that book, Anne helps the police solve a case by sensing some things from the victim. Now, this is the second book, The Sense of Reckoning. She is still, I won't give anything away from that first book, but Anne is still experiencing some problems from what happened in that first book. And it, she went through a lot of trauma toward the end. These are mysteries and ghost stories, but they're also thrillers. And there's definitely a lot of action. So in this one, Anne gets called to Maine, to Mount Desert Island, which is one of our favorite places in the world, to investigate something that happened decades ago. And another friend of hers who can also sense spirits asks her to help him because he's kind of at a dead end. So Anne spends time trying to help him. Her talents have evolved a bit since that first book, so that now she can sometimes see spirits or actually hear them rather than just sensing their presence. I loved this book. Like I said, perfect for the R.I.P. challenge. Mystery, thriller, and ghosts. I mean, what more could you ask for fall? I also loved the location in Maine on Mount Desert Island. That's where Acadia National Park is, which is one of many reasons why it's our favorite place. So highly recommend The Sense of Reckoning by Maddie Dalrymple. Though start with the first book, The Sense of Death. Love this series. And that's it for me for September. I had a wonderful reading month, finishing up Big Book Summer and diving into the R.I.P. challenge for fall. I would love to hear about what you read in September. Let me know down below which were your favorites. Oh, I didn't even mention my favorites. I think it's a tie because these are very different books, but The Sense of Reckoning is definitely a favorite from September. But also the Book of Longings, which, like I said, was a completely different novel, historical fiction, but I really loved it. So those are my favorites. Let me know down below what your favorites are. And please take a moment to like this video and to subscribe to my channel so you can see more.